What Christmas movie stars Doris, Susan, and Chris and takes place in New York City? Doris, Susan, and Chris and takes place in New York City at Thanksgiving. Well, the Christmas season. I can't believe you guys don't know this one. It originally came out in the 40s, and then it was re-released.
It's a Wonderful Life.
You're on the right track. Huh?
Miracle on 34th?
Miracle on 34th Street. Miracle on 34th Street. Yes, so I'm starting a series on the Advent themes based on Christmas movies, because you guys know I love movies so much. So since no one, but except for Roxanne, was able to guess this movie, well, there's a one that came out in like the 90s or something, the newer one, but whatever, it's fine. So I'm going to tell you the storyline and refresh some of your memory. Maybe you haven't seen it. So Doris works for Macy's. She's an executive at Macy's, and she's in charge of the Macy's Day Parade. And it's the day of the parade. She's trying to get everybody organized, and her Santa Claus shows up deep in his cups, and he's quite inebriated. And an older gentleman with the beard shows up, and he's like, "You're a disgrace." And Susan fires at Santa, sees this guy, and she's like, "Will you do it? I need somebody." And he's like, "Sure." So he steps in to be Santa, and he's a hit, and everybody loves him. He ends up working at Macy's as the Santa. And Doris has a daughter named Susan. And Doris is a no-nonsense, cynical, the world is she's very analytical, no imagination, no hoping for anything. It's just life is the way it is, and that's the way it is, and it's not going to get any better. That's kind of her outlook. And so she has taught Susan that this is the way life is. Susan does not use her imagination. Susan does not believe in any fairy. She has never told any fairy tales. She does not believe in anything make-believe, because that's not logical, and that's nonsense. She just doesn't believe in it. And so they hire Chris to be Santa. And Doris's neighbor takes Susan to see Santa, which she gets kind of mad about. And Susan starts to really like Chris. His name is Chris. She starts to really like him, and he maintains that he is the Santa. And Susan's like, "Yeah, whatever." So Susan also is like, "Yeah, whatever," until Susan watches him speak Dutch to a little Dutch girl. And that's when she's like, "Hold on. Something's going on here." So Susan starts to believe that he is the real Santa. Doris, of course, does not, because that's all poppycock, you know. She thinks he's a delusional old man. Someone eventually works it out to get him thrown into Bellevue, because obviously he's deranged if he thinks he's Santa Claus. And it looks like Christmas is not going to happen, because Kris Kringle is locked up in Bellevue. But Susan keeps believing that he is Santa, and she gets some other people to believe that he is Santa. She starts to get her mom to actually maybe believe that he could be Santa. And there's a final courtroom scene, and ultimately they're able to get the judge to say that he is Santa. He's released. Christmas happens. Huzzah! Well, during the course of the movie, Chris had said to Susan, she's like, "I just think you're a nice old man with whiskers. I don't think you're real. I just think you're a nice old man, and I like you because you're a nice old man, but I don't actually think you're Santa." And so he says, "All right, ask me for something that you've not asked your mom for, and don't tell anyone else, and see what happens." So she thinks about it. She's like, "I want a house." So they live in an apartment, and like they can see the Macy's Day Parade from their apartment. And she's like, "I want a house." And he's like, "That's a tall order. You're like 10. What are you going to do with the house?" She's like, "I want to live in a house, and I want a tree with a swing." And so he's like, "Well, I'll see what I can do." So at the end, there's this party, and there's gifts under the tree, and Susan runs, and there's nothing for her, and she's kind of devastated because there's nothing for her. And Chris comes over, and she's like, "I knew you weren't the real thing. I knew you're just a nice old man with whiskers." And he's like, "You never give up hope." Or the mom at this point is convinced that miracles do happen, whatever. And the mom's like, "You can never give up hope. Don't let go of something you're hoping for." And so then Susan's sitting there going, "I believe, I believe, I believe." Like, even though her logical mind is saying, "This isn't true. I've just been proven right that he's not the real thing because I didn't get my wish." But she keeps saying, "I believe, I believe." So they're in the car, and Chris gives them directions to get home a different way. And as they're driving, she sees the house that's on the picture that she gave to Chris. And she's like, stop the car. And it was for sale and whatever. So then the boyfriend and the mom are going to get married and live in the house. And of course, and the point of the story is miracles do happen. Like, not only the miracle that in a court they were able to prove that Santa is real and this man is him, but also that he could come through and get this 10-year-old this house and this dream that she had in her heart. And it's a story of hope. It's a story that you don't give up hope, because Doris gave up hope. Doris was, her husband either left, I think they got divorced when Susan was born. She's single. And she's basically, that has really jaded her, and she's given up hope that there is goodness in the world. She thinks Christmas is just a commercial holiday. She works for Macy's, so it's great for her, like financially. But she's given up hope that there can be miracles. She's given up hope that there can be goodness. And Chris comes along and shows her, like, there is goodness still. There can still be miracles, can still happen. And we can't give up hoping for things. And I think I can relate to that. Like, there are things in my life that I have hoped for and dreamed for that haven't yet happened. And I think, can it still happen? Like, am I delusional? Like, some of the things that I am waiting for and praying for and hoping for are not logical at all. And people are like, that's not logical. You need to stop thinking that. You need to move past that. And I'm like, no, because I really believe that this is something that the Lord has shown me can happen. But most people think it's just logic. Like, they don't want to, most people, I feel like a lot of people have given up hope. And the Christmas season is to remind us that Jesus came to show the mankind that we should still hope. I mean, before Jesus came, in like I said, the 400 years before Jesus was born, no prophets heard from the Lord. Nobody was hearing from God. But the Hebrew people could remember, they had prophets like Elijah and Isaiah and Elisha who had told them, good things are going to happen. The Lord is going to come through. I mean, you got to remember, in the time that Jesus was born, the Hebrew people were free. They weren't owned by other people. They weren't slaves, but life was bad. I mean, they were taxed so heavily that they were on the brink of starvation. They could freely move around, but the Romans were in charge of the world. And if you know anything about the Roman Empire, they ruled with an iron fist. Like, they came into a city, and you either bowed down to them or they killed you. There was no mercy with them. They were masters of forcing people to get on board with their program. And they were the ruling class, and what they said went. I mean, if you think about the Christmas story, remember when Herod heard, when the Magi came to Herod, and they told him that the king was born? Remember what Herod did? He had every child 2 years old and under killed. Murdered, because he didn't want any threats, and there were no riots. It's not like he ordered all these people to be murdered and there was a war or striking in the streets. They're just like, well, this is what happens. That's how brutal it was, that the king could order genocide and nobody stood up and said no. That's the kind of world they lived in. It was bad. But the Hebrew people had hope. There was a remnant of the Hebrew people who had hope, and they had hope because they had prophets from years and years and years ago, hundreds of years before, who said things like this. This is from Isiah, who's one of my favorites. It says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned. They were living in darkness. It was like, we talk about the Dark Ages. You talk about the Dark Ages. This was even darker than the Dark Ages. Things were bad. And they had to hope that there would still be a light that could come out of that oppression. It says, you have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. These people did not know joy. They will rejoice before you as people rejoice at the harvest, as warriors rejoice when dividing the plunder. He's saying a party's coming. Great rejoicing. I'm talking like out in the streets, kicking up your heels, like, huzzah! Right? Partying in the streets, joy that you can't even contain it is coming. For as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them. the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. These people had been in bondage before, and even though they weren't owned, they were in bondage. They were beaten at will. They were taxed till starvation. And God is saying, I'm going to break that off of you. I'm going to free you from that. I'm going to destroy that from you so that you can be joyful and live in freedom. It says, every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning. They will be fuel for the fire. He's saying that stuff is going to end. For to us a child is born. To us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. Of the greatness of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. And the zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. So here he's talking about David, and for the Hebrew people, they remember David as the greatest king ever. Like for them to talk about David, that reminds them of when things were good. Because when David was king, things were good. When David went out, he came back victorious. Anytime David went out and asked the Lord before he went, he came back victorious. He killed tens of thousands of people and came back every time. When David was king, they thrived. There was freedom, there was abundance. It was like they built that huge temple. Like it was awesome. Life was good. And they're like, okay, David was a great king, so we're going to get someone who's like David. We're going to get someone who's going to rule us, and we're going to thrive and be free under him. And that was to remind the Hebrew people, like, remember the joy that life was like when David was king? It's going to be like that, but better. And so Christmas reminds us that God comes through. That sometimes a promise made might seem like it's been forgotten. Isaiah was like 1,000 years or something before Christ was born. It was a long time before Christ was born. And so these people had gone a long time. It'd be really easy to think God gave up on us. Like we're living under the boot of the Roman law. Things are dark. We are starving. Things are bad. God must have forgotten us. He doesn't care about us. But God's like, no, I need you to hope. I need you to believe that I can come through. I need you to have a dream, and I need you to wait for it. I need you to pray into it. I need you to believe it so I can bring it to fruition, and then you'll know that I love you. So I want you guys to take one of your little cards. I made sure that every pew had some. I replenished. Oh, I didn't check your pew, Paula. And I want you to write down a prayer, a hope that you've had for a long time, that it feels like God has not come through on. If you need 5 of these, I can get you some more. I have one big one. I feel like I should write in big, bold letters. What's that thing you've been praying for a long time and it seems like God has forgotten you or rejected you? We don't want to be like Doris was in the beginning of the movie. Doris didn't think that miracles happen. Doris didn't have faith or hope in anything outside of logic and what she could prove and what she could do on her own. But we're a people of faith. And when you are people of faith, that means you believe in something that seems illogical. That means you say to God, hey God, I'm believing in you for this, even though it seems impossible. Susan said to Chris, I believe you can give me, I'm going to test you. I'm going to see if you can give me this house. Because if you can give me this house, then I know that you're real. Then I know that you're an entity that can come through. So what is your house? What is your dream home? And I want you to remember this. I love this verse out of Psalms. It says, "Send me a miraculous sign. Show me how much you love me, so that those who hate me will see it and be ashamed. Don't they know that you, Lord, are my comforter? You are the one who comes to help me." So if you need to write that psalm down and pray it over this thing, that's fine. I'll leave it up there for a second. I want you to take, we usually put these up on the board. I want you to take this and put it somewhere where you'll see it on a regular basis. On your mirror, on your vanity, in your car, as your bookmark if you read every day, if you've got a quiet space that you sit in and reflect. If it's inside your wallet, so every time you open your wallet, there it is. And I want you to pray and believe. I want you to have the faith that Susan had in Chris. I want you to have that same kind of hope and faith in the Lord that he can come through. I want you to say to him, "Lord, I'm trusting you for this. And I'm not going to stop praying for it because I believe, even when I hear silence, I believe, even when I don't see it, I believe, even when it seems hopeless, I'm going to hope in you for this thing. And I'm going to trust you. And I'm going to believe that you are real. Because the Lord is real. And he does love us. And he, just like Kris Kringle, wants to give you the things that make you happy, so long as they are within his nature. Like if you want someone else to die, you might not want to pray that prayer. But if your prayer is in the nature of God, that's something he wants to do for you. If it's reconciliation, if it's some stability financially, if it is direction in your life, if it is healing, if it is relationships, whatever it is, God wants you to be so filled with joy that you are running down the streets. I think about the shepherds. They talk about the shepherds. After they saw Jesus, they were running through the streets like a bunch of madmen, like, "Huzzah, it's amazing." They were like you see the old like West movies when they're having a party and they're shooting the guns up in the air and they're like, "Yeah, it's awesome." That's what God wants for you. He wants you running down the streets, kicking up your heels, coming into here and telling everybody what miracles he did for you. Because that increases the rest of our ability to believe in his goodness. So don't give up on your hope. Even when it seems illogical and hopeless, do not give up. And all of God's people said, amen.